Κύριε, γεια σας. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ τον Κύκλο και τον Πρόεδρο, τον κύριο Βενιζέλο, για τη δυνατότητα που μας δίνει για μια ανοιχτή συζήτηση ουσίας με βάση τα νέα δεδομένα και τις νέες προκλήσεις που έχουμε μπροστά μας. I would like to thank Professor Kevin Featherstone for being with us today. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, George, and my pleasure to be with you, and thank the organizers for the invitation.
Kevin is an expert in comparative politics, public policy, and political economy. His focus has been on the European Union and on contemporary Greece, both separately and in combination. And I will try during the next 20 minutes to get as much as many of his ideas on the topic of this seminar, the new geopolitical environment, Europe, and of course, Greece. Kevin, let's start with that. You've been writing about Europe for at least 40 years. How significant are the events of recent weeks for Europe? What do you think?
Well, I think as others have perhaps said, rather like Lenin, we talk about decades happening in weeks at the moment. There are tremendous changes occurring, changes which change 75 years of the post-1945 era. And I think at the moment, it would be difficult to talk about a West in any kind of coherent sense. That is, in political and military matters. What kind of unity do we have in the West at the moment? Vice President J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference himself raised the question, what values today unite Europe with the United States? And this is a tremendous change for us. The West fought the Cold War, believing it was in some kind of moral crusade. And then after the collapse of communism, we believed the rest of the world would share our agenda. We had won. Well, now we have Trump pursuing a very transactional policy, a very mercantilist approach. Everything is about deals. And they're also very willing to prioritize uncertainty as a strategic tool. This makes it very difficult for allies. We've seen Trump's comments on Canada,
yes,
and for others. It makes it very difficult for Western allies to follow the Trump lead, because we're not quite sure where it's going. And if I could just add one final point.
Was that a surprise for you or not?
Yes, and I think academics are wonderful at saying that after the event everything was predictable, but I think it was the extremity, the radical nature of the Trump agenda has been more than we would have expected. His comments about Mexico, Greenland, Canada, etc., are, I think, at the outer limits of what we might have expected.
So, how do you see the Trump effect on Europe playing out?
Well, I think there are many impacts from him, is creating a new narrative about Europe, a narrative based in terms of security politics. Britain and France, for example, are moving much, much closer together. Macron and Starmer have collaborated very closely. And I think with some effects, Britain and France have clearly influenced Zelensky after the disastrous White House meeting, influencing Zelensky in terms of projecting his willingness to do a ceasefire in Riyadh. But there are risks here for both Britain and France, depending on how Trump proceeds. But yes, we can look in terms of the Trump effect in Europe Trump is changing German foreign policy dramatically with the new German Chancellor promoting a major new fund, 500 billion euros, ending the debt brake. This is creating a much greater German military capacity. This is a huge shift, as someone was saying. It's Trump moving history along at a very rapid pace. But I think also Trump is having an effect in terms of the far right in Europe. We think in terms of Italian Prime Minister Meloni, for example, being highly critical of Putin,
Yes.
when Viktor Orban in Hungary is not. So there are diverse impacts here in terms of foreign policy. And dare I say that Trump may also be partially overcoming Brexit as well, with the collaboration between France and Britain.
So how might the EU itself change with Trump?
Well, I think there are a number of impacts on the European Union as a system. We've seen, as I say, these fiscal shifts, the idea that the European Union would allow countries to borrow more, to create bigger loans, particularly to invest in defense. And the German shift on the fiscal rule is a remarkable one. But yes, the European Union also needs to adapt itself to trade wars and to defend its interests. It is really quite remarkable that the United States, which could lay claim to having created the European Union after the Second World War, is now seeking to dismantle that Western trade order, overturning history. So I think we're seeing a new architecture in Europe in which the European Union tries to establish a much broader network of alliances with the UK, with Turkey, with Norway, other countries, in a much more complex architecture. But I think for the European Union, there are major risks here. If we can't rely on Trump, and we're in the world of spheres of influence, allowing Putin a sphere of influence, well, what about the European Union's own sphere of influence? In other words, what can the European Union offer countries like Moldova, Georgia, in any practical sense? When the choice for them seems to be Putin or Europe, what can Europe actually offer, which is somehow to secure their future against a Russian threat? In terms of the European Union and security, then of course we're seeing announcements about massive investments in defense, but the European Union itself is a long way from being able to be a defense organization itself.
Do you believe the European citizens are ready to pay for defense?
Well, I would say that public opinion is supportive of the European Union playing a defense role. Even before the recent crisis last autumn, we saw the Eurobarometer public opinion poll across all 27 member states had something like 80% of Europeans believing that the European Union should play a much stronger defense role. Now, when it comes to paying, of course, there are difficult choices to be made, and we're seeing those in the UK at the moment. But the European Union's shifts in terms of borrowing, in terms of creating new loans, should serve to lessen the financial cost for individual governments in a political sense. The European Union is creating a capacity, but I think there's a time lag, George. So the European Union has an aspiration to play a bigger defence role, but getting the jigsaw all together will take time. And I think the only realistic alternative is for the European members to play a much bigger role in NATO.
Okay. Trump seems to pose important challenges for the UK and its traditional special relations with the United States. Do you see the UK overcoming Brexit?
Trump is a major challenge to London, and no post-war American president has been a bigger challenge to London than Donald Trump. And if we think of British foreign policy for the last 8 decades, we've seen ourselves as a bridge between Europe and the United States. Well, being a bridge with the United States at the moment seems to be something really rather risky. The foundations aren't very strong. We don't know what Trump will do. Britain and France are asking Trump to give a security guarantee for putting troops into Ukraine. Well, what if Trump actually ignores that? He's having his telephone call with Putin today. What if they do a deal which says that there should be no armed troops in Ukraine? That would be a tremendous defeat for Britain as well as France. And what if Trump simply sidelines Britain and France in these Ukraine negotiations? The entire structure of having a bridge in our foreign policy between Europe and the United States falls away. Now, in terms of whether Trump is helping us to overcome Brexit, this would be somewhat contradictory, of course, because Donald Trump was a major champion of Brexit. But I think he is moving us much further along the spectrum. So I don't think in the next 10 years we're talking about Britain becoming a full member again of the European Union. We're not talking about a re-entry, but I think what Trump is doing is to make it clear to Britain and the EU 27 that there must be serious cooperation in matters like security. Now, for Macron in France, he's saying, well, yes, we can have deals on security, but we should also place these in a large package deal. So we have a new relationship between the UK and the EU 27. Well, let's see how that goes. But last week, let me add, there were 20 EU member states signing a so-called non-paper, which urged the EU and the UK to come to a major new agreement. Unfortunately, that wasn't signed by Greece, but 20 nations did sign it. So I think, to answer your question, not overcoming Brexit completely, but I think we're seeing much more functional discussions, agreements between the European Union and the UK, much more specific in certain policy areas. And this in itself would be a major advance on recent years.
Okay. You said earlier that the European Union is searching for new allies. And I wanted to ask you this. Canada evidently doesn't want to become a state of America, as Trump says. Could it become a member of the European Union?
You may have seen in the last few days an opinion poll in Canada which showed a large majority favouring membership of the European Union. I think that's not on the cards in any kind of official, formal sense. But clearly, whilst there is a Trump policy from the United States, both the European Union and Canada have shared interests in moving close together. We have the free trade agreement with Canada, which is a pretty advanced trading agreement. But I think we're going to see in political and military matters a much closer coordination. We both have an interest in collaboration in reaction to Trump's America.
Okay. So let's move to Greece now. What does this new Europe mean for Greece? What do you think?
The more Europe talks about a security system, the more Europe is creating a structure which is based on the big players. And in security terms, you're talking of Britain and France, hence the impact on Brexit. But a security system is not a system of equals. There's a hierarchy. And for the smaller member states, such as Greece, there is a strategic risk, I think, of being sidelined, of being left on the periphery. Unfortunately, we saw the other week that the summits arranged in London did not involve Greece. So there are, first of all, risks of being sidelined when you have the big players dealing in security matters. But I think also there are risks when it comes to the need to collaborate with Turkey. Both NATO and the European Union have a strategic interest in maintaining close and friendly ties with Turkey as a fellow NATO member. And of course, Erdogan can have much more influence these days. Turkey is expanding its influence. It's a major defense player. It's something like the second or third biggest NATO military power. I think the risk for Greece here is, firstly, that Trump, as in his first presidency, becomes rather enamored of Erdogan as a strong leader. But also, you don't wish to have Trump involved in any of the Eastern Mediterranean issues. I don't think Greece could trust a Trump approach on the Aegean, on the economic zones in the Eastern Mediterranean, and you don't wish to have Trump dealing with Cyprus at all. So I think the risk is to keep Trump at bay. For the European Union, then, as I say, European states have an interest in keeping Turkey on board. What that might mean poses risks for Greece. And we've seen the European Union being willing to engage in rather dirty deals as on migration with Turkey. So I think the risk for Greece is that the big players in security terms in Europe may try to do deals with Turkey, which are not particularly in Greece's interest. But I think the task for Greece is to... Greece has a strong interest in maintaining its position in the core of the European Union. And a uniting European Union is, in principle, a good idea for Greece, kind of strapped to the mast in a rather like Odysseus, as it were. So it's good that Europe is uniting for Greece, but it has to remain part of the core.
You say Greece might find greater safety with an EU that is uniting, but how well do you think Greece has adapted to the EU membership so far? And are you optimistic about its convergence in the future?
It's a major challenge. I mentioned Odysseus. Karamanlis clearly saw the strategy for Greece as being to strap itself to the mast of the European Union. And today's turbulence in the international system underscores that for Greece as a strategy. It's a major advantage that Greece is in the European Union. Its membership has brought many benefits, but remaining as a core member, it's rather, if I can switch the analogy, it's rather more like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the mountain rather than simply being strapped to the mast. The task has been Herculean. I think there has been a long-term risk for Greece of not being able to fully converge. And I think in the crisis, we've seen Greece making convergence in financial terms, budgetary terms, constraints of such like. But there are structural issues here for Greece. We think in terms of the wider aspects of public institutions in Greece. We know successive elections, successive prime ministers. The current prime minister is talking about making the state institutions more efficient and being better able to deliver policies. Let me just say on that if we look at some of the international indicators, rather like the World Bank indicators on the quality of public institutions, the quality of government institutions, then in the last 10, 15 years, Greece has converged with other Balkan states much more than it is converged with the Western European states like France and Germany. And that is not the case for Spain and Portugal. Spain and Portugal have improved the quality of their government institutions and converged with France and Germany far more than Greece. So we know public institutions are a problem. It's a structural issue for Greece, but we'd also think of the difficulties in terms of the judiciary and, yes, in terms of education and the universities. And I know that there is much excitement when a government reshuffle takes place. But can I just note that we in Greece have a really quite significant turnover of ministers. Kyriakos Perikakakis was Minister for Education for I think just over 2 years. Well, what does that say about the ability to have consistency of policy in a situation where the ministries themselves have so much changes of staff according to who the minister at the time is? So it is a structural issue more than questions of individuals. And Greece needs to be able to converge far more. So has Greece converged hitherto? Of course, at a nominal level, there is much change. But deeper systemic issues, which are, go beyond one party or one prime minister, still remain and still pose a major challenge. For the future, it's a question of, as the Prime Minister has said, moving ahead rapidly with reform. One might have thought that conditions in which you have a large parliamentary majority and a weak opposition might have encouraged more reform so far, but that is the challenge for Greece. And I think it is actually linked to the current crisis. Greece must remain a core member of the European Union. It cannot talk the talk without having serious, difficult, painful reform domestically in its institutions, in its opening up to a more competitive economy, easier for foreign direct investment. Greece has to meet some of these challenges because they also have implications for Greece's wider role in Europe as well.
Last question: Do you see a political stability in the country, or you see a threat on the political stability, mainly in terms of doing justice? This is a big problem now in Greece.
Yeah. And there are questions here about accountability. We think of the Tempe protests recently, etc. Clearly, there is a challenge here in terms of a disconnect between the public opinion seeking accountability for various actions and public institutions and the governments which seem to be the same old repetition, unresponsive, and no one actually carrying the blame. These issues are not unique to Greece. I could draw parallels in the UK. We're in a historical period in which the public expects accountability, and systems are struggling to enable it. In the Greek case, there are endemic long-term issues about the slowness, unresponsiveness of the judiciary, and they go beyond the present period. In terms of political stability, I think we ought to place this in some perspective. Greece has just come through the mother of all economic crises and has remained politically stable. It is a system which is fundamentally robust. Do its institutions need to be more adaptive, more responsive, quicker, more efficient? Yes. But in terms of a kind of basic political stability, I think Greece should be rather more optimistic about itself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kevin, for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I enjoyed it. Thank you.